Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
අතේ තියෙන බජට් එකට සන්ලයිට් බජට් කැටේ රුපියල් 100ක් පමණයි.
හරිම සුළුයි.
On 1st and 9 tonight, this Wednesday, the 30th of November 2022. All or nothing. President Ranil Wickremesinghe calls on COP countries to make stable progress to deal with climate change or dismantle the institution. Avenues. Sri Lanka's fiscal issues due to a history of populist policies and entitlement culture.
All these sources of financing that have dried up for banks will begin to open up if we have an IMF program.
No more in the night time. All tourist zones to be exempted from nighttime power cuts from December 15, says Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara. Eco-friendly practices. Sri Lankan research and development leads to biofertilizer products to cut down on chemical fertilizer while increasing the harvest.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. Now in your top story for tonight, President Ranil Wickremesinghe said that the outcome of COP27 summit held in Egypt is discouraging as world leaders fail to implement a universal and collaborative plan to tackle climate change issues. Now, President Wickremesinghe said that while politicization and stagnation have hampered the progress of COP27, sustainable progress must be made at COP28 for the conference of parties to remain relevant. The head of state strongly says it would otherwise be best to dismantle COP, as there is no need to continue such a charade. Issuing a statement, President Ranil Wickremesinghe said although world leaders have been meeting under the COP framework to confront climate change, the world has not come any closer to implement a universal and collaborative plan of climate action. The head of state said that the outcome of the summit is discouraging, as agreements reached at the UN Climate Change Conference COP27 failed to place countries on a complementary and progressive course of redress. He added that the biggest obstacle to the success of the COP27 has been politicization and stagnation, while absence of leadership by those countries who are historically accountable for the greatest damage and who are now capable of meaningful contributions has stymied the furtherance of climate action. He pointed out that nations of the global south are left to fight their corner with the Loss and Damages Fund, only a partial breakthrough and achieved largely as a result of the unified stand and increased pressure of the G77 nations in the past years. President Wickremesinghe also noted that the Loss and Damages Fund is a step in the right direction, but there is a critical omission in the identification of those nations who are responsible for making the requisite financial contributions. Neither does the reference of the establishment of the fund include any provisions on liabilities or compensations, as the fund does not address the root causes of climate change. He insisted that it is imperative, therefore, to arrest the destruction that is ongoing through a concentrated effort to achieve the goal of $100 billion in financial aid for prospective and preventive action. Meanwhile, President Wickremesinghe stated that even though a plan of action to ensure that the global temperature should not experience a rise of over 1.5 degrees Celsius was agreed, it has not come into full force. He added that while its original target has been retained, the manner in which the goal is to be achieved has been compromised following the decisions at COP27. Climate change is as much as a threat to the modern world as is terrorism, said the president. The head of state emphasized that COP28 in the UAE must not yet be another starting point, but rather stocktake of implementation of past decisions and a plan to work to strengthen, and a seal of approval for a year of work towards strengthening the global response to climate change, with emphasis on the energy sector. President Wickremesinghe made a critical statement saying that it is in order for the Conference of Parties to be relevant, sustainable progress must be made at COP28 If not, it is best to dismantle COP. In Parliament today, State Minister of Foreign Affairs Tharaka Balasuriya said Sri Lanka should move up in the Ease of Doing Business Index to increase the levels of trade. The State Minister said that it is a must that Sri Lanka cut investment and trade red tape, reduce bureaucracy and curb corruption for trade enhancement.
එක්ස්ප්‍රස් පර්ල් නෞකාව ගිනිපත් වීම නිසා ඇති වූ අහිතකර පාරිසරික බලපෑම් පිළිබඳ සම්පූර්ණ වාර්තාවක් රජය ලබාගෙන තිබේද? එම වන්දි මුදල් ගෙවා නිම කිරීමට අපේක්ෂා කරන්නේ කවදා වන විටද?
මේ එක්ස්ප්‍රස් පර්ල් නෞකාව ගරු කතානායකතුමනි මුහුදේ ඇවිල්ලා නවත්තලා තිබ්බා පාක් කරලා තිබ්බා. හාබර් මාස්ටර් එන්න කිව්වා. මහේස්ත්‍රාත් පරිශ්‍රයේ හෙළිදරව් වුණා. ඒ නවත්තපු තැන ඉඳලා හාබර් එක දක්වා එන CCTV ඔක්කොම මකලා. CCTV පටිය නොමැතිවීම වන්දියට බලපානවා.
අපි මේක කතා කරාට වැඩන්නේ මේ නඩුව ඉක්මනට දාගන්න ඕන.
ටේප් එක මැකුවා. ඉතින් ඒක නැතුව කොහොමද වන්දියක් කියවන්නේ?
ඒක අපි පිළිගන්නවා. නඩුව සම්බන්ධ කරුණු වලට තමයි අර ඕස්ට්‍රේලියානු සමාගමක් පත් කළ දෙන්නේ අපි නෙමෙයි.
ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවේ සභාගමට කියන්න බෑ ටේප් එක මැකුවේ කවුද කියලා. ඔය ආඩුවේ මකලා තියෙන්නේ.
හරි.
පරීක්ෂණය කරන්න ඕනේ එතන.
හරි. දැන් ඔබතුමාලා
talking nonsense. මේ මැකුනේ කොහොමද කියලා ටේප් එක පරීක්ෂණ කරනවද?
ඔබතුමා මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ දැන් අහන්නේ මේ ප්‍රශ්නේදී ඔබතුමා ඒක අහලා තිබුණා නම් මට ඒ පිළිබඳව විස්තරගෙන එන්න තිබුණා.
නිව් ඩයමන්ඩ් මේ පරීක්ෂණ කරලා ඩැමේජ් අරමය කරන්න ඉස්සලා නැවත් රිලීස් කරලා ඉවරයි.
ඒක පිළිගන්න. නිව් ඩයමන්ඩ් කියන නැව ගිනිපත් වුණාට පස්සේ කියන්න කනගාටුයි අමාත්‍යංශයේ බාරව හිටලා එවකට හිටපු දේශපාලන අධිකාරිය. දැන් මේකත් එක්කලා දැන් නාලක ගොඩේ ඇමතුමාගේ නම ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. කොළඹගේ මැතිතුමා විදේශ කටයුතු අමාත්‍යංශයේ හිටපු ලේකම්තුමා ඒ වගේම නාවික හමුදාවේ හිටපු හමුදාපතිතුමා. ඉතාමත් කනගාටුයි නැවට යන්න දුන්නා.
We are ashamed to see the state of the plantation today. We as representative of the plantation community, we are internally crying to see how workers are ill-treated, how workers are tortured today. This has to be stopped. You must take appropriate action to stop this nonsense by the plantation companies. Not only that, you have another unit in your ministry, Plantation Management Monitoring Division. Is this division monitoring the management of the estates? No, it's not doing that. It has become an agent of the companies. So you must pay your personal attention toward this division and see whether this division is performing or whether the division is working according to how they are asked to work.
We should open up our economy, and we need to not just open up our economy, we need to learn lessons from our neighboring countries, and we need to rigorously follow policies in order to improve our trade. I feel that we need to liberalize the trade policies. We need to go for more FTAs and we need to go for more PTAs. We have signed a few FTAs with India and Pakistan. But even if you look at these FTAs in particular, the one with India is working well, but it can work much better. We need to cut the red tape and the bureaucracy. We need to move up the Ease of Doing Business Index. We need to curb corruption. And if we only take these measures seriously and if we ensure that these measures are carried out rigorously, we can improve trade. I think we also need to get into trade agreements such as the RCEP countries.
Now, former Central Bank Governor Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy is of the view that although Sri Lanka's avenues of finance have dried up at the moment, they will open up once Sri Lanka manages to secure an IMF deal. Speaking at an event in Colombo today, the former governor stated that the island's current fiscal crisis is the outcome of populist policies and an entitlement culture.
The reason why we have this fiscal challenge stems from a rather toxic combination of one, populist politics, and two, an entrenched entitlement culture among all of us as the people of this country. These two things feed off each other in the kind of negative feedback loops and have pulled our country down over the last 70 years. The IMF program, as I said, this is an IMF program. I like to think of it as the Sri Lankan program supported by the IMF. And that is, we've had revenue enhancement-based fiscal consolidation, cost recovery-based pricing for fuel and electricity, strengthening social protection, increasing cash transfers, through improvement in also having better targeting and more efficient delivery, restore price stability through data-driven forward-looking monetary policy based on flexible inflation targeting framework, rebuild external reserves through a market-determined flexible exchange rate when the conditions are right, safeguard the financial system by ensuring the banks are well capitalized, reduce corruption vulnerabilities, by improving financial transparency and public finance management, by introducing a stronger anti-corruption framework in line with UN Convention on Corruption, conduct an in-depth corruption diagnostic with IMF technical assistance. Now, as I said, the thing about having the IMF by our side is that we are able to get some financing to provide a buffer to this kind of the pain that comes through these the austerity programs that are necessary to be implemented. So all these sources of financing that have dried up for banks will begin to open up if we have an IMF program.
The Minister of Power and Energy, Kanjana Wijesekara, says all tourism zones identified by the Ministry of Tourism will be exempt from nighttime power cuts with the scheduled addition of Unit 3 of the Norachole coal power plant to the national grid on the 15th of December. He also mentioned that the island-wide night power cuts will be reduced to 1 hour with this addition. The minister, taking to Twitter, stated that the southern and Ella tourism zones will be exempt from the 1 hour 20-minute nighttime power cuts with effect from the 1st of December. However, he said that the island-wide power cuts of 1 hour during the daytime and 1 hour and 20 minutes during the night will continue until the 15th of December. He also added that there will be no power cuts during Christmas and New Year. Now stay with us to find out how research and development in Sri Lanka has come up with innovative products that could replace chemical fertilizers. All this and much more on that story coming up after this short commercial break. Welcome back. Now, research and development are two key factors that drive a country towards economic growth. But Sri Lanka, compared to most of the countries in Asia, has a low budget allocation for R&D. Despite lower budgetary focus, there are institutions and experts in the country carrying out research to innovate and introduce new products that can be potential game changers for the country. Now, AdaDerana found such an institution that has contributed to the country through research that aims at seeking solutions to some of the pressing issues faced by the economy right now. Here's a report by AdaDerana's Chabont Fernando.
The topic of fertilizer has been a burning issue in Sri Lanka since last year. Following a decision to transition to 100% organic farming, Sri Lanka lacked a proper plan for production and supply of organic fertilizer at the time. This decision affected thousands of farming lands across the country, reducing crop yields and harvests and alarming a state of food insecurity. With the development of an economic crisis in Sri Lanka earlier this year, the World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations warned that the food crisis in Sri Lanka is likely to worsen due to poor agricultural production and highlighted the immediate provision of agricultural inputs, including fertilizers, which are highly essential to tackle the situation. While the government is taking efforts to import fertilizer to support the farming industry, local research conducted by Sri Lankan experts has led to the production of fertilizer types that are eco-friendly in nature but also helping farmers increase yield by cutting down the usage of chemical application in cultivation. One such product developed is biofilm biofertilizer, a brainchild of the National Institute of Fundamental Studies. Biofilm is now the most technologically advanced biofertilizer applied to a large extent of paddy fields under the government's biofertilizer subsidy program. This fertilizer is also applied to tea plantations, vegetables and maize cultivations.
This was started in early 2000 when one of my students sort of discovered that there's a combination of fungi and bacteria. She found it in a microbial culture plate, and we sort of observed that and we continued research to identify its efficacy. After doing certain fundamental basic research, we found that this can be used for crop production as a biofertilizer. Now when we say biofertilizer, it's a product which can cut down chemical fertilizer in agriculture. We have developed a certain product called biofilm biofertilizer for paddy cultivation, which is called biofilm R. 1 liter is sufficient for 1 acre. By using this, we can cut down farmers' chemical fertilizer use up to 50%. And at the same time, we can increase the farmers' current yield level of paddy by applying this up to 20 to 30%.
During the 2022 Yala season from May to August, biofilm biofertilizer was supplied to about 80,000 hectares of paddy cultivation in Kurunegala, Gampaha, Galle, Kilinochchi, Vaunia, Mana and Mullaitivu districts. The National Institute of Fundamental Studies says the government will be able to save millions of dollars spent on fertilizer imports if the capacity of production is enhanced.
We have commercial partner. They are doing all the manufacturing of the product and distribution. By now, their production facility is for about 200,000 acres. Now they are expanding their factories to increase this at least up to 1/3 of the paddy cultivation. Our next target is to completely remove this 50% of chemical fertilizers which is combined with this to produce the crop by using locally produced organic fertilizers. That project has just started now.
The agricultural lands in Sri Lanka amounts to 42% of the country's total land. And all of these require millions of tons of chemical fertilizer. However, with the usage of fertilizer types such as biofilm bio, Sri Lanka will be able to save millions of dollars spent on fertilizer imports while increasing the yield levels and reducing the involvement of chemical fertilizer usage in agriculture. NIFS research on fertilizer is not just limited to the biofertilizer biofilm. Scientists and researchers have also developed a fertilizer type called rhizobium, which specifically targets bean varieties.
To date, we have distributed up to 15,000 acres in the country, and it is distributed via different channels. We have Department of Agriculture and Agriculture Department related provincial agriculture divisions and so on. We want to expand it from 15,000 at least up to 50,000 acres of legume cultivations in the country. Now we are looking for a partner to commercialize this. By using this, what we have done is we have completely cut off the use of urea application. 1 hectare, it's about 500 gram. If we apply urea, it will be about 150 kilograms per hectare.
Other research carried out by the NIFS is also initiated as a response to burning national problems in Sri Lanka. Established in the year 1981, the National Institute of Fundamental Studies is the only institute in Sri Lanka which, by its act, exists for the sole purpose of conducting research in natural and social sciences and philosophy for national development and scientific advancement. Throughout its 40-year period, NIFS has engaged in basic and high-caliber research focusing on different thematic research areas with the aim of becoming a world-renowned center for excellence for research in fundamental studies.
Research is for people's benefit. It's the moral and ethical duty of every academic, every researcher to see that their research findings are disseminated, converted into products or services, or contributing to the improvement of the quality of life of human beings.
The way we contribute is into, for example, when we say generating new knowledge, that knowledge may not be directly impact on the general public, but it need to be further research. For example, it need to be extended to the applied research, where our fundamental research may end up with the scientific process. Then by starting from there, other researchers look at how this process can be applied to develop innovative products. But then we need the industrial collaboration to bring it to a commercializable level.
Research and development is an essential factor for economic growth. However, Sri Lanka is a country with low spending on R&D, which is less than 1% of its gross domestic product. So, how can the country achieve its long-term economic goals? Chamod Fernando, for AdaDerana English.
Welcome back. In your business news, Sri Lanka's headline inflation based on the Colombo Consumer Price Index has decreased to 61% in November from 66% in October this year. According to the Department of Census and Statistics, food inflation dropped to 78.7% in November compared to 85.6% in October. The CCPI for all items for the month of November was 242.6, and it recorded a decrease of 1.2 in index points. CCPI in November 2022 decreased to 242.6 from 243.8 in October, while year-on-year inflation decreased to 61% in November from 66% in October 2022. The report said that month-on-month change contributed by a negative 0.53% from food and 0.03% from non-food, while core inflation decreased to 49.4% in November 2022 from 49.7% in October this year. The general price level has increased by 142.6% compared to the base year. The Sri Lankan shares closed at a one-month high granting for a fourth straight session highs today. The all share price index closed 3.3% higher at 8,651.23, the highest index gain since November 1st. The more liquid index S&P SL20 closed 3.4% or 89.78 points higher at 2,730.08. The SPI has fallen by 0.5% in November after losing 13.4% in October. The market witnessed a turnover of 3.3 billion rupees, higher than this year's daily average turnover of 2.9 billion rupees. The market also saw a foreign inflow of 3.9 million rupees. Meanwhile, Sampath Bank pushed the index up to close at 10.9% to 36.6 rupees. Other top gainers were Brown's Investment, gaining 15.4% to close at 7.5 rupees, and LOLC gaining 9.4% to close at 411.3 rupees. Now let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies in the world. That's all the news we have for this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time for the very latest news. Until then, visit our website www.adaderana.lk for more news. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.